Before you scroll past this, I need you to stop just for a single moment. The person who walked out of your life did not leave by accident, and God was not looking the other way when it happened. What you have been carrying in silence, the confusion, the ache, the unanswered question that wakes you up at 2 a.m., it has a name today. And before this message is over, you are going to understand exactly why it happened. Something changed. Not with warning, not with a grand explanation. One day, there was a familiar person in your world, and then, quietly, without your permission, they were gone. Maybe it was a single conversation that ended everything. Maybe it was a silence that slowly replaced what used to be warm presence. Or maybe it was the heavy realization that someone you deeply counted on had simply stepped out of your life, and God did not stop them. Chosen one, I need to ask you a very times, honest question today. Did you ask for this shift? Did you pray for this distance? Did you choose this empty space? I already know your answer. You have been carrying a silent question. It may not always be in spoken words. Sometimes it is just a physical weight, a lingering confusion that sits in your chest when the world goes quiet at night. But the question remains exactly the same. Why? Why would God allow this shift? Why would He let someone leave your life who felt like they were supposed to stay for the distance? Chosen one, you have asked this question in 100 different forms. In prayers, in tears, in silent whispers. And today, you are going to hear the answer. An answer that will change the way you see every loss you have ever experienced. Stay with me. Do not turn away. By the time this message is finished, you will understand exactly what God was doing in the precise moment that felt like abandonment. You will understand why the shift had to happen. And chosen one, I promise you, you will not grieve this connection the same way again. Not because the pain was not real, it was, but because you are about to discover that what felt like rejection was actually protection, love, in its most precise and costly form. I am not going to rush to offer you cheap comfort, not yet, because before comfort can heal, you must know that you are completely seen. I understand exactly where you are sitting right now. You are confused. And you are not confused because your faith is weak or because you did something wrong. You are confused because what happened made absolutely no sense from where you were standing. The person who stepped away, the connection that dissolved, did not fit the beautiful story you believed God was writing. Chosen one, that confusion is not a spiritual failure. It is simply evidence that you were paying attention to the details of the journey. And I need to say this with absolute clarity. What you lost was incredibly times real. I am not here to tell you to just get over it. I am not here to minimize what that relationship meant to you. If it mattered to your heart, it mattered to God. The grief you are carrying right now is not a sign of weakness. It is not spiritual immaturity. It is the honest response of a heart that loved genuinely and experienced a genuine fracture. Chosen one, God does not ask you to wear a mask. He does not ask you to pretend it did not hurt. He already knows the exact depth of the wound, and He was watching when the cut was made. But there is something else, something much quieter, a thought most people are terrified to say out loud. Some of you have been wondering, in the silent, cold hours of the night, if you were the cause of this relational death, if you had loved a little better, if you had been more patient, if you had held on tighter, would they still be standing beside you? I need to speak directly to that whispering shame, chosen one. The fact that someone left your path does not mean you failed at love. and I will explain exactly why in a moment. But first, I need you to put down that weight. It was never yours to carry. There is one final thing I must name before we go deeper: the loneliness. Not just the ordinary ache of missing someone's voice, but the specific, heavy loneliness of losing a connection you truly believed God had placed in your life. When that kind of relationship ends, you cannot explain the depth of the pain to anyone else. Well-meaning people will tell you to move on. They will say time heals all wounds, or that God has someone better. They mean well, but they do not understand that this was not just a human bond. This was something you had prayed over, something you had trusted God with, something that felt like it carried a clear divine fingerprint. Chosen one. That kind of grief is a very isolating path. But today, I want you to hear this. You are not walking it alone. There is a voice from the past whose words I want to bring to you now. Not a preacher, not an internet motivational speaker, a scholar, C.S. Lewis, an Oxford professor who wrestled deeply with faith, doubt, and pain. A man who had buried his beloved wife and walked through a grief so heavy he had to write a book just to survive it. He understood from the very inside what it feels like when God permits a painful event, one you did not ask for. Lewis wrote a metaphor that I believe was crafted by the Holy Spirit as much for you today as it was for his readers decades ago. When you hear it, I believe something deep in your spirit will recognize the truth. In his timeless classic, Mere Christianity, Lewis wrote these words: listen to them slowly with your heart. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you are not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Chosen one, let those final words hang in the quiet of your room. He is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. You thought you understood the renovation. You thought you knew exactly which relationship needed to be fixed. But God is not just patching up the rooms you selected. He is restructuring your entire life on a blueprint you have not yet been permitted to see. And here is the revelation. You are that house. The relationship that changed, the person who stepped out of your life. They were never the foundation of your identity. The foundation of who you are has never moved. They were furniture. Beautiful, precious, deeply meaningful furniture. But still, they were furniture in a room that God needed to redesign. And no architect apologizes for moving the furniture when the new blueprint requires a completely different space. No master builder says sorry for clearing a room before he begins to build a far grander structure. Chosen one, the person who left your life was not taken as a punishment. They were relocated by a sovereign God who saw exactly what needed to be built in the empty space they were occupying. That is not abandonment. That is divine precision. Think back to the upper room. Jesus sat with his disciples on the very night before his world and theirs would shatter. And he looked at these men who loved him, who had left their homes, their networks, and their safety to follow him. And he said something that must have startled them. He said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Chosen one, did you hear that? He does not spend his time pruning the dead, dry branches. A dead branch is simply swept away. He prunes the fruitful ones, the branches that have life, the ones that are actually growing, the ones that carry potential. He cuts the very parts that are healthy, because in the hands of the vine dresser, the cut is not an act of anger. It is an act of ultimate times investment. Let me write this upon your heart today. The vine dresser does not cut the branch to punish it. He cuts it because he has examined it. He has looked at its fibers. He has measured its strength, and he has seen its true capacity. His conclusion is not that the branch is a failure. His conclusion is that this branch is capable of bearing so much more than it has ever produced before. But the current growth, as beautiful and green as it is drawing the nutrients away from the fruit that is yet to come. So he cuts, not out of anger, not out of disappointment. He cuts out of vision. Chosen one. The God who allowed that relational shift in your life was not looking at you with disapproval. He was looking at you with an eternal vision. He saw that your current connections were limiting the weight of glory you were designed to carry. And he loved you enough to cut. I want to be very gentle, but very honest here. I am not telling you that the person who walked away was evil. I am not saying they were toxic, or that the connection was a mistake. Sometimes, the relationships God prunes are the most beautiful ones you had, because the issue is not always the person. Sometimes, the issue is the attachment. It is the subtle way they had become the anchor of your safety, the way their approval had become the lens of your identity, the way you relied on their presence to feel validated, seen, and secure. When a human being occupies that central space in your heart, chosen one, there is no room left for the Spirit of God to dwell. The throne is already occupied, and God will not compete for a seat in a house he bought with his own blood. Look at the vine in the hours immediately after the pruning. It looks damaged. It looks smaller, raw, and completely exposed to the elements. The beautiful leaves that once covered it are gone, and it stands bleeding sap in the cold air. If the vine could cry out, it would say, "I am less than I was yesterday. I have been ruined." But the vine dresser stands back and smiles, because he knows what the wood cannot see. He knows that the sap is now being redirected to the deep roots, preparing to shoot out a growth that will make the old season look pale. Chosen one, that raw, naked feeling you are carrying, that is not the signature of your ruin. It is the most times fertile, creative moment of your spiritual life. Chosen one. Let this next sentence anchor your drifting mind. The pruning was planned long before the sudden conversation that ended the relationship, long before the cold silence replaced the warm late-night texts, long before you even felt the first hint of a shift. The vine dresser had already marked the branch. God did not react to their exit. He did not scramble to repair a broken plan. He acted. He moved on a timeline you were not permitted to see, using a blueprint you did not possess. He saw the exact moment the connection began to limit your calling. He saw that your heart was beginning to settle in the valley, and in his mercy, he cut. It was the most costly love he could show you, letting you weep for a season to protect the destiny he wrote for you before the foundation of the world. Chosen one. I need to pause our journey for just 60 seconds. If you are still listening to my voice, and if the Holy Spirit is whispering to your pain right now, I want to invite you to make a simple declaration of faith, not to help a channel or feed an algorithm, but as a dynamic act of surrender in the spiritual realm. Open the comments below and write these 4 words: I trust him. Let this comment be a stone of remembrance, a quiet, stubborn statement to the darkness, that even though the cut was deep, you still trust the hands of the one who holds the knife. Write it now, and then let us walk into the next layer of this mystery. Near the end of his life, C.S. Lewis wrote a collection of letters. They were later published as Letters to Malcolm, and in those pages he laid down a hard, brilliant law of the kingdom. Nothing that has not died will be resurrected. Chosen one, I need you to let that truth sink deep into the wound. Nothing that has not died will be resurrected. The relational shift you experienced was not a minor setback. It was not a temporary pause. To your soul, it felt like a death. The death of a hope, the burial of a future you had already planned. But God does not perform resurrections on things that are still breathing. The old form had to cease. The attachment had to wither and die, so that the resurrected purpose could have room to stand. The loss was not the end. It was the prerequisite. This is the exact pattern God spoke through the prophet Isaiah. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Chosen one. Notice the word now. It does not say, I will think about doing something in your future. It says, now it springs forth. This means that while you are still sitting at the graveside of that relationship, the seed of the new thing is already splitting open. The problem is not that God is inactive. The problem is that our eyes are so swollen from weeping over what was buried that we cannot perceive what is rising. He's asking you, will you stay focused on the grave, or will you turn your face to the light? Think of a seed. If you had never seen a garden grow, and you watched someone press a seed deep into the black dirt, you would think they were conducting a funeral. You would say, it is finished. It is covered in darkness. It is gone. And to the seed itself, it feels like a violent end. The protective shell must rot away. It must crack open under the pressure of the damp earth. It must lose its shape, its comfort, its very identity. But that crack is not the end of the seed. It is the escape of the life hidden within it. Chosen one, you feel cracked open. You feel buried in the dark, cold soil of isolation. But you must hear this. You have not been buried to be hidden away. You have been planted, and the darkness wrapping around you is not the darkness of a tomb. It is the quiet, protective darkness of a womb. The new thing God is creating in you requires empty space, and that relationship He removed, no matter how much joy it brought you, was occupying the exact ground where your destiny needed to stand. It consumed your late-night thoughts. It absorbed your emotional strength. Without realizing it, you had built your entire stability around their presence, and because they occupied the center of the room, there was no space left for the weight of the calling God is bringing you. Sometimes, the Father must clear the table, not because the old food was poisonous, but because He is about to lay down a feast that requires the entire surface. He had to clear the comfort of that connection, so that your soul would finally learn to anchor itself in the silence of His presence. Chosen one. The empty space they left is not a mistake. Do not rush to fill it. Let the void breathe, and let the Father occupy it. This is where it becomes deeply personal for you, chosen one. The connection you buried in tears. The person you surrendered in the dark. The relationship that withered despite all your desperate prayers. It was the seed, and the vine dresser has not forgotten where he planted it. You think it is lost forever. You think the story ended in that cold soil. But the sovereign God who held the scalpel is the same God who pours the rain. What you gave up in quiet obedience, what you allowed Him to cut away without screaming, is undergoing a transition in the unseen realm. And when it finally breaks through the surface, it will not look like the seed you wept over. It will be purer. It will be stronger. It will be exactly what your final destiny requires. But first, you must stop digging up the dirt to check on the seed. Trust the ground. But I need to warn you about something right here before we go any further. This is the exact point where many chosen ones make their most costly mistake. The comfort of understanding feels like a rival. You hear the metaphor of the seed. You feel the truth of the womb, and something inside you whispers, I understand now. I can rest. But, chosen one, understanding is not the same as times receiving, and receiving is not the same as times walking forward. There is one more layer to this mystery that most people never reach, because they stopped here, satisfied with the explanation, and never pressed through to the inheritance waiting just beyond. Stay with me. What comes next will reframe every painful relationship God has ever allowed in your life. Here is the truth that almost no one will tell you about the divine surgery of your relationships. We love to talk about spiritual warfare. We love to point to the enemy, to speak of attacks and spirits of division. Sometimes those battles are very real. But more often than you think, chosen one, the person God removed from your life was not an enemy. They were simply your comfort zone, wearing the face of a person. They were the comfortable harbor where you had agreed to settle. They were the warmth that kept you from stepping out into the cold, demanding destiny you were made for. And because you loved them, and because they felt safe, you would have stayed at that dock forever. Even if staying meant the slow, quiet death of your calling, chosen one. Listen closely to the quiet. Sometimes, God must make your shelter collapse to force you to continue walking toward the kingdom. Look back to the calling of Abraham. In Genesis chapter 12, God appears to him with a massive, destiny-altering promise. He tells him he will make his name great, and that through him, all families of the earth will be blessed. Before the promise could move an inch, God said, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." He had to leave his homeland, his community, his father's house, the three layers of his security, his history, his identity, and his comfort. God did not tell Abraham that his father's house was wicked. He did not say his homeland was cursed. He simply said, "It is your familiar." And you cannot inherit the promise while remaining bound to the familiar. Chosen one. Take that ancient story and lay it over the empty space in your life today. The relationship that shifted was your father's house. It was your homeland. It was the place where you knew exactly who you were, where your role was comfortable, and your tomorrow was entirely predictable. And because it was predictable, it felt like peace. But comfort is not the final calling of a chosen one. God looked at that connection and saw it was anchoring you to the ground. It was keeping you tied to a version of yourself that you had already outgrown. You were trying to step into a new season while holding onto the old safety net. And the Father knew that if He did not release that rope, you would never pack your tent. You would never cross the river. The shift was painful, but it was the only way to force your feet to move toward the promise. Imagine a massive ship. It is built with seasoned timber, soaring masts, and heavy canvas ready to catch the gale. But as long as that ship remains tied to the harbor docks, it is safe. The storms cannot break it there. The waves cannot toss it. Yet, a ship was never built to rot in the shallows. If it stays in the safety of the harbor, The wood will soften, the sails will decay, and its design will be wasted. The ropes must be untied, the docks must disappear. The ship must feel the terrifying, vast pull of the deep ocean. Chosen one. The relational shift you went through was not the ocean rejecting you. It was the harbor letting go of your ropes. It was the cut that allowed you to float out into the deep waters where your true strength and divine design can finally be revealed. Chosen one. Hear this with your spirit. You were not left behind. You were released forward. There is a glorious difference between those two states, and you must feel it. When the docks release the ropes, the ship does not linger at the edge, weeping over the wood it left behind. No, it catches the wind, turns its bow toward the horizon, and sails. The people who moved away, the connections that went quiet, they were not leaving you stranded. They were being cleared from your road so that you could run without extra weight. The same sovereign God who told Abraham to leave his household is the God who oversaw the quiet space in your life. He did not abandon you in the desert. He positioned you at the edge of your inheritance. The journey did not fail. It just became real. Think of the operating table. When the surgeon stands over the patient with a scalpel, he holds knowledge that the patient cannot access. The patient feels only the cold, sharp pressure of the steel. They feel the wound opening. If the patient could look up, they might scream, "Why are you hurting me?" But the surgeon works in silence, not because he is cold, but because he is completely focused. He sees the infection that must be removed. He sees the artery that must be protected. He sees the future health that the patient cannot yet conceive. Chosen one, the relational shift was God standing over your life with a scalpel. He cut. He saw what you could not see. He saw that if that relationship remained, it would eventually choke the calling He placed in your soul. You felt only the pain of the cut, but He was looking at the beauty of the cure. In His deep work, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis wrote a passage that lays bare the beautiful, terrifying cost of love. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it up carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable, chosen one. Let those words wash over your grief. The pain you feel is the proof that your heart is still made of flesh, not stone. God does not ask you to build a coffin around your capacity to care. He validates that to love is to accept the wringing of the soul. And He does not expect you to look at the empty space in your life and feel nothing. Let this truth settle into the deep places of your mind. God does not look at your weeping over this lost relationship and say, "Why are you crying? You should have been stronger." He does not look at your empty hands and call them a failure. He looks at your broken heart and He honors it. He whispers, "I know. I made you with the capacity to love deeply. I built your soul to care, to invest, and to hold on. And I saw exactly how much it cost you to let them go." Chosen one, every tear you shed in the dark over that silence was seen. None of your grief was a mistake. The ache you carry is not a sign that you were foolish. It is the proof that you loved like a child of the kingdom, and the Father is close to you in this very moment. And now, I want you to hear what the Father is saying to you right now. in this midnight silence. Chosen one, the relational shift you did not ask for was not my rejection. It was my protection. I did not clear the room to leave you cold. I did it to save your calling. I saw the subtle weights they were placing on your wings. I saw how you were willing to shrink just to keep them comfortable. I saw the destiny you were quietly preparing to abandon just to keep their feet beside yours. And because I love you too much to let you settle in the plains, I stepped in. I performed the surgery. I cut the ties. I cleared the space. I did not abandon you in the dark. I hid you in the shadow of my hand until the path was clear. Stand up, chosen one. Look forward. The person you lost was never your destiny. I am. The scar you are carrying on your heart today is not a mark of shame. It is not proof that you were rejected or that you were not enough. Chosen one. That scar is the signature of the surgeon. It is the physical evidence that you survived the divine operation. It is the reminder that God loved you too much to let you remain in a comfortable trap. Every time you look at the empty space, every time you feel the sting of the silence, do not tell yourself, I was abandoned. Look at the scar and declare, I was saved. Chosen one, let the quietness wash over you now. The surgery is complete. The instruments have been laid down, and the silence that has settled in your life, the space where their voice used to be, is not a permanent void. It is simply a season. And the God who designed the rotation of the earth, the one who commands the winter to yield to the spring, never leaves his chosen ones in a perpetual frost. This silence has a boundary. It will not last a single hour longer than what is required to make your roots deep and strong. This is why the psalmist wrote these steady words. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. Chosen one. This is not a warning to stop loving people. It is not a command to become cold, bitter, or detached. It is simply the rule of the anchor. Human beings, even the best of them, are like ships. They move, they shift, they respond to their own storms. If you tie your anchor to another ship, you will drift and toss whenever their wind changes. But God is the shore. He is the immovable mountain, the rock that stands forever. Take refuge in Him today. Let Him be the one anchor in your life that no relational storm can ever drag away. I want you to pray with me now, wherever you are, in the quiet of your room or walking in the dark. Let these words rise from your spirit. Let them be your quiet surrender. Father, I bring you the honest grief of what I lost. I acknowledge that it hurt. I admit that my heart has been wrung and that I did not want this cut. But today, I choose to trust the hand that holds the scalpel. I believe you see the path I cannot see. I believe you love me too much to let me destroy my calling. I release the person who walked away. I forgive the silence they left behind. I lay down the exhausting weight of trying to hold on, and I receive the empty space you have cleared. I receive the new blueprint of my life. I receive the seed that is springing up in the dark. I anchor my soul to you alone. Amen. Chosen one, let this final truth rest upon your eyes as you sleep tonight. What God is building in your life is worth every single thing that was removed to make space for it. The new rooms He is framing. The deeper foundations He is laying in the quiet. The authority He is carving into your character. It is so much grander than the small house you were trying to maintain. You gave up a temporary comfort. He is preparing an eternal kingdom. You gave up a person. He is giving you Himself. Rest in His hand tonight. The surgeon's work is finished. The healing has already begun. I want you to see something before we close. Not who you are tonight, sitting in the raw quiet of this season, but who you will be when the surgeon's work is complete. There is a version of you on the other side of this season that you have not yet met. A version that carries an authority no success could have built. A version that has learned to anchor its soul in the silence of God's presence alone. A version that walks into rooms and carries a weight of peace so steady that people feel it without being told its source. Chosen one. The empty space that person left is not your wound. It is your credential. The cut that felt like an ending is the introduction to the most fruitful chapter your life has ever known. What God is constructing in you cannot be rushed, but at times will be finished. And what it produces will outlast every comfort you surrendered to get here. If this message found you in your quiet season today, subscribe and walk with us. This is a gathering of chosen ones who are learning to wait, to surrender, and to heal in the hands of the Father. We share these messages every week to keep your eyes fixed on the promise and your heart secure in His presence. You are not alone in the quiet. You are not forgotten in the dark. The promise is still coming, and the morning is closer than you think.